views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Our guest tonight is the council member from the 17th Council District in the Bronx. That includes the Bronx neighborhoods of Longwood, Hunts Point, Crotona Park, Melrose, Morrisania, Mott Haven, Port Morris, and Soundview. We'll talk with him about development in the South Bronx, the Right to Know Act, a new South Bronx health facility, homelessness and housing, waterfront development, gentrification, and much more. If you have questions or comments, send them in an email to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, or you post it on our Facebook page and we'll read it on the air during a future edition of the program. For the here and now, the freshman council member from the 17th District in the Bronx. Welcome back to Council Member Rafael Salamanca Jr. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Gary.
Let's start with development. There's all kinds of development. You and your colleagues, in particular, starting at the top of the borough president all the way on down, are boasting of development. Let's break some of that down. The first thing that was on my mind was the Crossings Mall at Southern Boulevard. Now, if I remember correctly, when you were district manager, you were here and we talked about the coming of that mall. As I understand it, the thing was scaled down over time. Explain to me how we went from where we were to where we are now.
Well, originally, when they came to the community board, we were supposed to have a mall and there was supposed to be affordable housing on top of the mall. We changed the zoning for that area for housing and to have a mall. They came back after the zoning was done to the community board, said that they could not afford to do the housing component. They can only build the commercial space.
They meaning the developer.
The Brewster Group, yes, the developer. Yes. And so they moved forward with their construction, and we were under the impression that a Red Lobster was coming in. Don't know what barriers there were, but my understanding is that Red Lobster is not coming in. They have signs up. You have a Dollar Tree coming in. You have a McDonald's moving in, the Dunkin' Donuts. We're trying to work with the developer to see if he can bring in a good anchor store, but also healthier food options. That's something that's needed on Southern Boulevard.
It sounds like you'd be a little disappointed. We'll start with the housing. Disappointed that they didn't get housing in that spot?
Yeah, it's always disappointing when a developer comes in with a plan, you approve that plan, knowing that it's going to really benefit your community, and then they turn around to the local community board and say, well, the component that your community is really going to benefit from, which is affordable housing, we can no longer afford it.
In addition, as I understand from what I've read, people were disappointed. I mean, listen, Red Lobster is not, no offense, of course, not the greatest restaurant in the world, but it would have provided yet another place for people to go out and maybe a little better food than some of the fast foods and those kinds of things. And then you're saying that's also not happening.
So a Boston Market is coming into that area. Mm-hmm. The Red Lobster was what we called, it would create some type of nightlife on the Southern Boulevard bid. There was going to be over 100 jobs that were going to be created. There was an agreement to hire locally. And it's unfortunate that they could not come through with that.
Is there something to be learned from this? I mean, you at that time were district manager, now you're a council member, so that in the future, if plans are made and promises are given or somewhat are given, then you at least will kind of protect the community from having a developer do something like that.
So what I've learned as being a council member is the power that the council member has when you go through the land use process, the ULURP application. In that ULURP application, that's when you negotiate with the developer in terms of AMIs, job creation, whether you're going to have union employees there to provide some type of maintenance work, but also the housing component. If I were the council member then, with the knowledge that I know, I would have sat down with the developer, and he would have to have given it to me in writing that he was going to provide housing at this facility. If not, he would have been at breach of contract.
I will not make any references to your predecessor. We'll just leave it at that. But it's nice to know, at least at this point going forward, you'll at least be in a better position to protect the community. That sounds like really disappointing, especially in a community that needs more, certainly more housing, affordable housing, there's no question about it. But even to kind of change the look of the community, give it a proper nightlife and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another project which you do support, and in fact, today in the Daily News, they singled you out because they were complaining about other of your colleagues. I won't ask you to comment on any of your colleagues, but they were saying other colleagues say, basically, not in my backyard, not in my neighborhood, but they congratulated you for kind of supporting the La Central project. So let's talk about that project and why you're so excited. I know we have some photographs or artist renderings of what it's going to look like. I thought it looked pretty good, but give me some details about La Central.
It's a beautiful project. You know, where it's located, I went to Alfred E. Smith High School, right down the block. So I would take the bus, walk up to Alfred E. Smith, and I always saw this land. It was a vacant piece of land there. So fast forward 15 years later, I'm the local council member, and this project is on my desk. Turns out how we're going to redevelop the Melrose area. It went through the local community board. I sat in some of those meetings, community board 1. And then when it got to my desk, there were certain things that I wanted to see different. For example, I needed to see more lower AMIs, lower income. Every project that comes in, I'm making sure that there's mixed income. I do not want to displace anyone in my community, whether it's low-income families or working class families. So I sat with them and we negotiated. We were able to get 10% of those units to be at 30% AMI, which basically for a family of 3 making $24,000 a year, they're paying about $600 and change a month in rent, which is awesome. The amenities that this project brings.
Although 10%, frankly, doesn't sound like a lot. If you're talking about, I think there were 900 units there, that's 90 units.
Yes, so there's 992 units. 180 units are there for a program for a not-for-profit. Common Ground is working, so they're for individuals that are formerly homeless and also for very low income. And then so it's about 5 buildings, and the other 4 buildings, the lowest percentage of AMI was 60% AMI. So what I asked is that they go back and do the numbers and give me a certain percentage of those units at 30% AMI. So I got 30% AMI, 40% AMI, 60, and then it goes up, I believe, up to certain units at 130% AMI. Mm-hmm.
So let's just talk about this, because this is such a difficult problem in so many communities, and frankly for leaders like yourself who want to develop the Bronx. So you bring in new housing, and nobody wants our communities to do worse than they used to do. We want them to do better. How do you make it so that, frankly, when you put new stores in, maybe a nicer restaurant, let's say, a higher scale restaurant than Red Lobster, or you bring in, you know, one of the higher end coffee chains, or something that makes the community better, that people don't say, aha, we're now gentrifying the neighborhood. This is not good for the people who have grown up and lived and worked in the Bronx in the past. And are you secure that your dream of saying we don't want to displace anybody will be realized in this case?
No, as new developments come in, as a local leader, I need to ensure that my families that are low income have access to these beautiful new units. Also, my working class families have access to these beautiful units, and not including the amenities that are coming in. You have the Y coming in, you have a skate park coming in. BronxNet is going to have space there as well. Now, when we're talking about these high-end anchor stores, I welcome them into our communities. Number one, they will employ locally. And number 2, you have members in our community who want to shop in these stores. You know, if I want to drink a good cup of coffee, why do I always have to go to the local bakery? I support them. Or why do I always have to go to the Dunkin' Donuts? You know, there's other options, and our community should have those options available to us.
And you're not worried that it's going to, you know, bring in a higher level of income that will ultimately make it too expensive for other people to live there or anything like that?
You know, we have working professionals in our communities. For example, my wife and I, you know, we both work. We have all these developments
And you
being
happen to
built
live
around
there
us.
still.
And we cannot afford to live there because our income is too high based on the income guidelines, you know. And so you have other families where you have their children went to school, have come back making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, you know, and they want to stay in their communities where they were born and raised in. Why not ensure that we have units available for them as well?
You know, I'm certainly encouraged anytime that BronxNet expands or gets to do what we do and do that in other communities is obviously a wonderful thing. I was particularly heartened by the news, which actually had been around for a while, that the YMCA was going to be there. I thought, first of all, if you look at the YMCA, they have a number of different facilities in other boroughs. We only have currently one, but to put that to me, as important as it would be to have a store anchor, that to me is a real anchor for the community because it bridges the gap for anybody, whatever their income is, they can grow and learn and develop with the Y. I'm assuming you feel the same way.
I'm excited about the Y coming in. Had a hearing recently at a land use committee. One of my colleagues from Coney Island gave me a great idea, and the gentleman that runs the Y is there, in terms of the fees that they'll be charging, because there's a fee accompanied when you go to the Y. So they will be working with us to ensure that for low-income families, there's a certain fee that is decreased, which is affordable for residents in our community.
I mean, it sounds great. I don't know what else to tell you. I'm very happy about it. We should identify exactly where it's going to be. I know I've seen the addresses, but maybe you want to talk about exactly where it is so people will know what part of the Bronx is getting a bit of a facelift and getting something new and interesting.
Yeah. So this project is in the Melrose section of the Bronx, you know, again, this area of the Bronx has been underdeveloped for quite some time. At least exactly where.
Southeast of the hub, just southeast of the hub?
Yes.
I think that if I had it right, looking at my own map and trying to figure it out. A couple of other development notes. You had put some money into a health facility. Now, so if we're bringing more people in, they've got to be taken care of and they've got to be healthful. Tell me about that.
Yes, I was able to work with the speaker, Melissa Margarito, and the Bronx delegation, and allocate $3.8 million to Urban Health Plan. There's a piece of land on Southern Boulevard between Westchester and 167. There was a fire there many years ago. A pet shop burned down, a nail salon, and cleaners, and so this land has been vacant for quite some time. It needs to be remediated, and Urban Health Plan has purchased the land. They're working with the Brownfield program for the state to clean that land, clean up that land. But the ultimate goal, they need $10 million to start the project. So I was able to get them $3.8 million. So
you got a little seed money there to get started.
Yes, and so I'm looking forward to being able to continue to provide health, increasing the health availability to residents in my community, especially for such a prestigious organization such as Urban Health Plan, who does not just do primary care, but they have over 20 subspecialties, and they have this incredible nutrition program in terms of how to decrease diabetes, healthy eating. So I'm excited to be able to be part of such an organization who's providing such a good benefit to our community.
And certainly they, and I know, and many of our friends and neighbors in the Bronx know Urban Health Plan, have kind of been with us as things have grown and developed in the Bronx and different neighborhoods and things like that. So I can appreciate your enthusiasm. We did a show, I'd have to look it up when it was. You know, by the way, for folks who don't know, we're coming up to our 22nd anniversary of BronxTalk in a couple of weeks. But we did a show about the Haven Project, which is waterfront development project, and there was visioning out there. Talk to me about your vision of the Haven Project, where it's at. For folks who don't know, this is a waterfront development project and kind of looking at the waterfront in different ways in the southernmost part of the Bronx. So talk to me about where it's at and what your involvement hopes to be.
So, you know, as a district manager, we were instrumental in ensuring that we protect our water space in Hunts Point. Now that I took over, I have the Port Morris section of the Bronx, and I was working with the speaker, Melissa Margarito, and we were able to allocate $2 million for a pier in Port Morris. The project is actually about 18 to 20 million dollars. They just needed $2 million. They requested $2 million from the city. The rest will be raised privately. It's again an opportunity to preserve that waterfront and provide a safe haven, or to provide access for residents in the community to go out, just enjoy the view, go fishing. I'm really excited about that. Looking forward to it. The beginning of the groundbreaking within 2 to 3 years.
And you, I presume, plan to continue to be involved in it and kind of supporting it and all that.
Yes, there's other sections in the Port Morris area which are vacant lots owned by the city. I'm working with other local community-based organizations on identifying who's the agency who has oversight of this property, which hasn't been utilized in quite some time, to see how we can open the space up to the community. So I'm really looking forward to the work that we're going to do in Port Morris.
One of the advocates who is down there in that part of the Bronx, I told him you were coming on the show, and he said we have a new problem that is developing of kind of a homeless camped out. A group of homeless are camping out on 149th Street and
Yes.
Melrose and all that. So I'm just curious what you know about it and what you think solutions might be. I mean, we certainly don't want to just take them and move them and then put them in somebody else's neighborhood. But how do we look at this population and deal with it, not only for the community that's there, but for those people in the long term?
Melrose and 149th, we have an issue with opioid and heroin use.
Not unlike elsewhere in the Bronx and elsewhere.
It has gotten overwhelming. I'm working with local residents who actually, they take pictures, they send it to me on Twitter, and which is really helpful. When I take that information and I send it to the City of New York, DHS, DOH, and 2 weeks from now, I'm actually going to have a roundtable meeting, opioid heroin roundtable meeting with community leaders and the city agency to see how we can, number one, get them the help, and number two, how we can really clean that area up. I'm also working with Immaculate Conception, Father Skelly. He's going to be part of this roundtable meeting that we're going to have to see how we can address this problem.
I think for a problem like that, it can't be one of those, well, let's do it. You're really going to need to deal with, if you say there's a drug issue, you got to deal with that. If there's certainly a poverty or even a mental health issue, you've got to deal with that. So your plan is to, in a couple of weeks, put a team together and look at that issue.
We're bringing in the stakeholders in the area. So you have Lincoln Hospital, you have Boom Health, Common Ground, Bronx Works, where they will be part of this conversation with the Department of Health, NYPD, the state, also the Department of State is coming as well.
Sounds like an appropriate way to deal with it.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, it's my own commentary on what I heard. You told me something just before the show, and I hadn't heard, I do my research, hadn't heard anything about it. Something coming to the Hunts Point Meat Market, or you're developing something?
Yes, so
I said, well, save it for the show, so tell me what it is. What are you working on?
We were also, in this part of this budget, we were also able to allocate $3.4 million to the Hunts Point Meat Market. The Hunts Point Meat Market, they provide meat to about 70% of the tri-state area, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey. When I did a tour of their facility, on any given day, they have about $100 million worth of meat in their market. But they do not have a backup system. Therefore, they were to lose power for a matter of 3 days. They would lose all of their meat.
Oh my goodness!
Yes. So this
$3.4 million for the refrigeration.
Yes,
I guess
exactly.
That's what we're talking
so
about.
this $3.4 million, what it would do, it would purchase 2 backup generators. Actually, the total cost is $5 million. They're putting in the rest, but $3.4 million will provide backup generators so that we can protect our meat source, meat supply here in the city of New York. So I'm not just protecting jobs in Hunts Point. I'm protecting the businesses, but I'm also ensuring that our food supply does not get affected.
One of the interesting things about the Hunts Point market, it is the largest food market, a huge fruit market. I mean, it's the largest in the world, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, within that very district and within, a quarter of a mile or a half mile away, we've got very terrible food deserts. Seems to be kind of crazy that we've got the biggest market in the world, and yet we can't locally serve people. I don't have a pointed question about that. I'm just curious about how ironic that is and your thoughts about that.
I mean, you know, in the Hunts Point, I'm there often. We can improve in terms of bringing in healthier food options to our residents. We do have quite a few bodegas. We do have one supermarket, and I know that you have organizations such as Urban Health Plan, such as The Point, who are working with the bodegas and the Department of Health on the Shop Healthy, where you can come and you have fresh produce. When you walk into the bodega, it's right there. It's in your face. You know.
Oh, I hope so. We need
water.
it so bad in the Bronx.
The way you adjust your water, you know, at the eye level. So when you go in, our youth go in for something to drink, first thing they see is water, opposed to those quarter juices, you know, that's full of sugar.
Right.
You know, so we are working. We are working to improve our food options in Hunts Point.
You know, I have to say, I think your answer is appropriate because the market is one thing, but it's really the local stores, kind of the point of purchase is really where the issue is, as far as I'm concerned. Just reviewing things that are under your name right now, you gave some money to Hostos Community College.
Yes.
Let's talk about one of the Bronx's most well-known educational institutions.
Yes, Hostos. We were able to allocate $1.5 million in capital money for their resource center. They have some space in the 149th Street General Post Office that's there. We have not done a check presentation, but just excited.
Oh, so we're exposing it on the show before the big show.
Yes, but just excited to be able to participate and be of assistance to a community college that's providing educational services for my residents.
That former GPO is a very interesting project, I feel. For people who don't know, the Young Woo Associates that had originally applied to be at the Kingsbridge Armory ultimately got that space, which was going to be changed around. What's the progress on that, and what's an update on what's going on at the GPO?
Haven't met with them yet.
Okay.
We are planning on meeting with them to check the progress of what's happening there.
Mm-hmm. You also are involved in street cleaning services, and
Yes.
you've worked with Wildcat. I guess this goes back to part of the homeless question and working with people who really need jobs at a frankly very basic level. Talk about that project.
In the city of New York, we have what's called Clean NYC Initiative, where we get some money, we get some funds, and we can allocate it to different organizations that will help keep our city clean. I gave $150,000 of that pot to Wildcats. I worked with them in the past when I was a district manager. With that money, they would provide 4 days of cleaning service at all different parts of the of my council district. So a certain day they'll be at community board 1, certain areas where sanitation really doesn't clean and it's an eyesore. Community board 1, 2, 3, 6, and 9. Those are the areas that they will be focusing on.
How many people will, aside from the general populace that will benefit from cleaner streets, how many people will be involved and how many people will benefit from participating? Do you have a sense of that?
Per day, anywhere from 6 to 8 individuals for the entire year will participate. And you know what's rewarding is that Wildcats helps individuals who are formerly incarcerated, have no work experience, or are homeless. You know, and so therefore they help you in terms of getting a job, getting the understanding of what a job really is, and something that you could put down in your resume, and you get paid for it.
Yeah, and people who otherwise would be, frankly, in many cases, a load on society or in danger of recidivism, you're giving them an opportunity to at least do something constructive and participate in something.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense. You told me something beforehand, and I couldn't believe it. So that right now, as the law reads, if the city wanted to put up muni meters and basically say your block or where you live or where you shop is now going to be metered where it never was, they have the right to do that without going through some kind of process, or even you as a homeowner say, no, you can't do that on my street. That sounds not correct. That sounds like unfair.
Right now, the Department of Transportation can install a muni meter anywhere they choose without any community input. So I've put in a bill where I have 34 sponsors. Basically, what it requires the DOT to come to the local community board, make a formal presentation, and go to the local council member and make a local presentation. I think having that reporting mechanism will empower the community and have input where we can come out and fight and say, no, we do not want this muni meter there. Because to be quite frank, once they install it, that's it. It's a done deal. It stays there.
As I said, I was surprised to hear that. One would think there would have to be some discussion, whether it be with the community board or others, to make a determination about that. That you can't just throw them up there. I want to talk about the Right to Know Act. This really was a point of contention that many people felt that the constitutionality of being stopped and frisked and all that needed legislation. And then Melissa Mark Viverito decided, well, we'll let the police department take it out of the realm of legislation and let the police make it a matter of procedure, that they give a business card and handle stop and search in those ways. Your thoughts on the matter? Were you unhappy when you saw it withdrawn out of the pool of legislation? It
was surprising, knowing the amount of council members who signed on to this bill. I think it's an important, there's two components. Richie Torres has a bill where the officers have to identify themselves with name and rank. And I think that's important in our communities. If you get stopped, the officer should tell you his name, his rank, his precinct. And I know Antonio Reynoso has another bill where prior to you being searched, you have to ask permission.
Where are we at now? We're almost out of time. Where are we at now? Are you disappointed? Were you like, gee whiz, we shouldn't have done that? Just what's your attitude toward it?
So my attitude right now, I'm because Councilmember Torres and Councilmember Antonio Reynoso, they're the prime sponsors of this bill. I am, and I know that Melissa Mark Viverito came to an agreement where NYPD is going to implement this in their guidelines. I'm just being observant. I'm respecting the prime members of this bill, and should they move forward, would love to have a conversation with them if they want to move forard on passing this through the full
Sounds
stadium.
like you're doing what a freshman council member should do. It's appropriate, and I mean, at this point, you're not going to rock the boat, and I mean, you're going to wait and see. I think it kind of makes sense at this point.
Yeah.
Did you want to say one last?
Yeah.
thing?
Well, what I wanted to say was there was an agreement with NYPD to implement these changes. So I am monitoring them. If we see that they're not coming forward and then not implementing